to live and to love the gospel of the Lord.
Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, presents an inspiring gospel reflection by Father Michael Sparrow. Father Michael is a Jesuit priest working as a writer and retreat master at the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House outside Chicago.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He takes away every branch that does not bear fruit, and every one that does, he prunes, so that it may bear more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word that I spoke to you. Remain in me as I remain in you. Unless, just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in them will bear much fruit, because without me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me will be thrown out like a branch and wither. People will gather them and throw them into a fire, and they will be burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it shall be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord. Today's Gospel from John chapter 15 is the last of 7 I am statements that Jesus gives throughout the Gospel of John. Beginning with chapter 6, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." In chapter 8, "I am the light of the world." Chapter 10, "I am the sheep gate," or "I am the door." Again in chapter 10, "I am the good shepherd." And chapter 11, "I am the resurrection and the life." Chapter 14, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And the last of his statements that Jesus gives in the midst of the Last Supper discourse, his last words to his disciples, "I am the vine, you are the branches." One of the things that's unique among this final statement of Jesus as the vine, it's the only one where he directly refers to us and says, "You are something. I am something, you are something. I am the vine, you are the branches." Jesus speaks very directly in that image of the connection between the vine and the branches. He gives us our identity, doesn't he? When we understand who Jesus is, we understand who we are and our mission in life more clearly. Today we celebrate the feast of St. John I, Pope and martyr of the 6th century. John was involved in one of the heresies that has continued to rear its ugly head throughout the entire history of Christianity, this question of who is Jesus? The Arian heresy denied the divinity of Jesus, proclaimed that he was the Messiah, he was the Christ, but he wasn't God. At that time, when John I was Pope, Italy was ruled by Theodoric the Goth, who was an Arian. The Roman emperor was a Christian, Justinian I, and he was over in Constantinople. And in an excess of religious zeal, he was persecuting very actively the Arians. And so Theodoric asked John to go, ordered him to go and meet with the Roman Emperor to resolve this controversy. Justinian agreed to most of the demands of Theodoric, but not all. And when Pope John came back and reported the result of his meeting, Theodoric was not happy, threw John in prison, persecuted him, broke his health, and eventually he died. He's considered a martyr. Who is Jesus? That's the question that we continue to struggle with throughout the ages. And these great I am statements in John's gospel point us that Jesus is bread, Jesus is light, he is the doorway, he is the gate, he is the good shepherd, he is the resurrection, he is the way, the truth, and the life, and he is the living vine. And when we remain connected to him, then we begin to understand who we are. Notice that today's gospel ends with Jesus saying, "You will become my disciples and bear much fruit." This process of becoming a disciple is a lifelong journey. And the test as to whether we are belonging to Jesus, whether we are really his disciples or not, is whether we bear fruit. What are those fruits? Well, Paul names some of them in his letter to the Galatians: joy, peace, patience, kindness, long-suffering. Those are the fruits that when we remain close to the vine, we bear those in evidence in our life. Just because a person says they are a Christian doesn't mean, obviously, they're a Christian. We see contemporary examples of that played out in spades right now in the war in Ukraine, which is being perpetrated from the Russian perspective in the name of God. Vladimir Putin considers himself a Christian. There he was on Holy Saturday night holding his Easter candle, proclaiming Jesus as the light of the world, and the Patriarch of Moscow, Patriarch Kirill, blessing the Roman troops as they go in to slaughter the Ukrainians. What is the fruit that they're bearing? When we understand who Jesus is, we begin to understand who we are and who one another is. We look at one another with eyes of compassion and eyes of understanding. A huge controversy that's raging right now as a result of the leaked draft from the Supreme Court and the proposed or the probable overturning of Roe versus Wade are the protests that are raging around the country right now that's saying, you can't take away my right to an abortion. What is the child within the womb? Is it a human being or is it just a blob of cells? When we begin to understand who Jesus is, we begin to understand who we are and who one another is, as we protect the right to life from conception through natural death. It also begins to affect how we look at our neighbors, how we look at those on our borders, how we look at those who are fleeing from their lives. Certainly we look with great compassion on the Ukrainians who are fleeing for their lives. But what about the people from Africa? What about the people from Central America? What about the people from Mexico that stand at our borders? How do we react to them? When we understand Jesus as the bread of life, as the light of the world, as the door, as the good shepherd, as the resurrection, as the way, the truth, and the life, as the vine, then we begin to understand ourselves as connected to him. And if you've looked at vines lately, you know that they grow in all kinds of different directions. And those branches shoot out in different ways. There are branches that are on the far right of the vine, and there are branches that are on the far left of the vine, and there are branches that are right in the center, but they're all connected to the vine, are they not? How hard it is for us to see those who see life differently than us, whose cultural values are different. How hard it is to say that we're all connected to this great vine that is Jesus. How do we stay connected to the Lord except by meditating on his word, remaining close to his sacraments, and walking in his footsteps, acting as Jesus acted, so that we may grow to become his disciples and bear the fruit, kindness, peace, patience, long-suffering that Jesus calls us to enact in our lives. Amen? Amen.
Heart to heart, hand in hand, praying for grace to understand. Spirit of Jesus, open our hearts to live and to love the gospel